Thanks for coming on the Self-Aware with Campbell Care podcast. Dr. Joseph Yee is our guest today, the street MD, and a man of many talents, one of which is talking smack on social media. Another is talking truth to his patients, help him start it off, on the streets. But would love to get your take. I'll give a little bit of your biography before we start, but love to get your take on your background and how you got into, helping people with psychiatry and holistic from there.
Absolutely. I'm happy to get into that. But for the people listening to this, I just wanted you guys to know that you remind me of like a Keanu Reeves of modern day medicine. Meaning I heard that this guy's made a killing and he's achieved it all, but he lives very humbly in some little apartment in New York, and he just going out and about talking to the everyday people, and he's not really kind of up there, his ego's too high or anything. And you're the most humblest dude I know. And having come visit you here, and we just came back from breakfast, you're mingling with the people, and you just live a very simple life, man.
Thanks, Joe.
You got a very pure, genuine energy to you. So I'm happy to be here vibing with you and the good people here today. Thanks,
Joe. Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to also say, too, for people who have known you or followed you on social media for a long time, because your Instagram is YOJI, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Yogi MD. You're pretty much the same in person as you are on camera, but I'd say you're a little bit gentler, maybe a little softer in real life, but you can't have that one-on-one interaction on social media that you can in real life. But you truly care and are a kind soul. I think that does come across, but it's definitely much more obvious when you're with people in real life. You're really trying to ask a lot of questions on your lives and trying to get people to think and help them. But in real life, you really care about people, which is cool to see too.
If I acted like the way I did on social media in real life, I get my ass whooped, man. So
yeah.
I gotta tone it down a little bit.
That's fair. It will definitely work that way.
But to answer your question, how did I get started?
Actually, see if you can scoot in just a little more.
Okay.
It should be good. Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your question about how did I get started on this whole journey, I wish I could say, Brad, that I was like you, growing up to always want to be a doctor to help people and make real, powerful, meaningful changes in this world. But that wasn't the case. A lot of people that watch my lives know the story that I grew up being bullied a lot. My parents were butt broke. The girls that I liked wanted nothing to do with me. So I had a major chip on my shoulder, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to become somebody. I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to make some money, and then I'll attract some attention. I'll get some women, so all the wrong reasons why I want to be a doctor. So, and I felt like if I became a doctor and I made a living, that would solve a lot of my problems. And, sometimes pain is the greatest motivator in life, more than inspiration. So because of that chip on my shoulder, I worked really hard, got myself into medical school. But when you have lousy ass reasons want to make money and, attract attention and that kind of stuff to become a doctor, it's not strong enough to get your ass through gross anatomy. And once I had that course, I quit medical school, and I asked the dean if I could take some time off, a mental health time off, and he allowed me to take 3 years off.
You really quit?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm super abbreviating the story, but gross anatomy messed me up. It was just way too much of med school and cutting up dead bodies and examining the parts. That's not what I thought a doctor would be. You watch things on TV and it's a little bit different. Yep. Than what it is in medical school. And I'm sure you experience that kind of stuff too. But you probably like that kind of stuff, whatever you're learning there. But I wasn't interested in learning that kind of stuff. And again, I went in for all the wrong reasons. So I took 3 years off, and I decided to pursue a music career. And during that time, I did a lot of drugs, met some really cool people. It was a lot of fun trying to pursue a music degree, a record deal. But after about 3 years of that, man, putting all that poison into my body and not getting anywhere with music, it got really depressing. I got very sick. And at a certain point, I said, nah, I can't do this anymore. So then I had a rejuvenated purpose to want to go back to medical school. And I said, because I suffered with my health, mental health, maybe I could do something in the world of psychiatry and with addiction medicine. But the problem is I need to get myself to feel better and overcome this addiction to all these drugs that I was hooked on. So when I decided to come back home and made that decision to go back to med school, like the first thing I did was I started like exercising more and eating lots of fruits. And working out and eating clean was like my savior. And then I got better. I got through the withdrawal, got myself healthier. And then I went back to medical school with a rejuvenated sense of purpose. And that was what allowed me to get through and get that degree. So in hindsight, man, I really didn't learn much from medical school and or my residency program for that matter. It was those 3 years doing music, getting messed up on all the drugs, experiencing all the hardships and the challenges of life. That's where I got my training to do what I do now to help people. So it's interesting how the universe and Allah and God, works things out for you.
Yeah, it's like the wounded healer archetype. Like you had that wound where you had to go through getting yourself off of drugs, having that like wake up moment where you started to take control of your life again. And that's pretty much exactly what you do now, is like helping people find different ways, creative ways to get healthier, to get off of drugs, to detox. And now you have a supplement line too, Beyond Recovery, that helps people with that same journey. Yeah.
And at the time, when you're going through the 3 years of hell, like, again, the first year of music was pretty cool, but then the second and third year, like the drugs catch up to you and the lack of nutrition catches up to you and the lack of money and the depression and people betraying you. And like, it catches up to you. And at the time, I'm like, why me? Like, why is this happening to me? Like, I'm giving it my best to try to break into the music industry. Like, God, why is this? But then a decade or two later, it's like, oh, because of that, people are drawn to what I have to say, my style on social media, and even my clients in real life, they resonate with those kind of stories and that spirit that I've, I guess, was influenced by all those years. Not from medical school, because there are plenty of doctors that are spitting out knowledge and people are just like, I don't really connect with this guy. But it's from the 3 years, that was like my PhD and I guess the street MD hood.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like you're speaking not just from your education, but from your lived experience education.
Yeah.
But when you say like, medical school didn't teach you what you needed, what did it give you any useful, like medical pharmaceutical background? Like I'm wondering like, what were you missing in med school? Like what did you wish med school had given you?
So if I had to do it all, my daughter asked me the other day, she said, if you had to do it all over again, would you? And I said, hell no. Oh, no,
really?
No way, man.
Like I'm out.
So, truthfully, if I had to do it over again, I would like to become a doctor. I actually enjoyed this role, but I would have went to naturopathic school. I think that just makes a lot more sense to me. Like when you give your patients what your body needs to heal itself, that makes a lot more sense to me. I do like the opportunity to prescribe some medications. I do like that, but dude, the training, you and I talked about this so many times, Brad. It's all about diseases and masking symptoms. And, one of the things that gets very frustrating nowadays is when I see patients and I inherit patients and doctors put them on like 3 or 4 different antidepressants. There's no rhyme or reason as to why you would do that. And then you're telling me the doctor never taught you about nutrition. So for me, what I wish I learned more about is the different kinds of foods that you could eat to help clean out your body and revitalize your minds and just like improve your energy and mitochondrial health. These are the things that I think we really should be talking about to help people heal themselves, give them the knowledge and the tools they need to help heal themselves. And I think the classic example that I always give is like, we might have had a few hours of nutrition, and it was called biochemistry of nutrition. And then they taught us how to memorize a triglyceride fat molecule on a test. And they didn't teach us about what kind of fats are healthy to eat. So that's the kind of stuff that we learned in medical school. And I'm sure people heard this kind of stuff a lot about the Western medical system. It's not really keen onto what we need to do to fully heal. And I want to give you another example too. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was at the American Psychiatric Association, annual conference, and the president of the APA came out to speak, and he was talking about how we have all this new funds for these the new researches to show how these different medications are going to really revolutionize psychiatry. So I raised my hand and I said, are there any research that are being funded that are going to be talking about the role of nutrition and mental health and or with addiction recovery? And the guy said, not as of now, but if you could prove to me, if there's any papers that you could send to me that shows that there's a link between nutrition and mental health and addiction recovery, I'd be happy to look into it. This is the president of the American Psychiatric Association, Brad. not acknowledging that there's a link between nutrition and mental health and or addiction recovery. Like, that's pretty lame.
It's a major red flag.
That's a major, look, any mom who's listening to this right now with basic knowledge of health would know that that's a ridiculous statement from the president of the APA.
It's like you give your kid like a Mountain Dew or a Bang or something like that. You know they're going to be bouncing off the walls if they're having food dyes and tons of sugar and caffeine, but like they're telling you there's no correlation, whatever. There's no association with nutrition.
Well, he said that he didn't know.
Yeah.
And he asked me to prove that by sending him, and I didn't. And I'm like, dude, this is lame. Like, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah.
So,
yikes.
So when the holistic wellness people make fun of the Western allopathic system, there is significant truth to that. All I'm saying is that for the holistic wellness posse listening to this podcast, just consider the fact that there are some dumb doctors and there are some, very shady, greedy businessmen in pharmacy and so on. But the medicine's not the fault. It's the doctors and the business people behind it that taint the big picture of big pharma. But there are some meds that I think are super helpful and have the potential for massive healing. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I would like to talk about today.
Yeah, well, we can segue into that. I'm curious, before I get to what you like using now and how you really help your patients now, I do want to jump back to one point you mentioned, which is how you were talking about how you started working out, moving your body, eating better, getting more produce in. How did you know to do that? Like, how do you know that was going to get you out of those 3 tough years?
Yeah. It's interesting. Before I answer that question, it's crazy how you and I were just like talking about random things all day, and now we're like all serious about medicine.
Yeah.
Now we're talking all this science. We just talk about random things just for the people that are listening to this behind the scenes. We just talk about random things about our clothing and I don't know,
90s music,
friendships, and all this. But how do I know? Yeah, awesome question. Intuitively, I knew that I was putting poison into my body. When you're snorting cocaine, doing ecstasy every weekend, doing ketamine, tons of marijuana, and you just know that your body is getting weaker. It's fun, it's stimulating, but even the stimulation is like shorter lived each time. You just don't get the intensity of the high anymore. You just feel weaker and weaker. So intuitively, I just knew that I had to eat cleaner. And fruits are, what I consider nature's candy, one of the greatest blessings of life. It tastes so good and it's just so refreshing, gives you energy and just cleans out your body. So intuitively, I just knew that I had to eat a lot of fruits. So mangoes and watermelons and apples and whatever my mom was willing to make me at the time. And she saw it too. She knew that I looked like really ill. And then once you have a little bit more energy, then it makes sense to move your body a little bit more. When you move your body a little bit more and have some fun, and I advise everyone here, like if you're not turned on by the word exercise, try to play a sport. Like pickleball is a big thing nowadays. Everyone's playing pickleball, and I was a big tennis guy and a ping pong guy. So just playing tennis and eating cleaner was like one of the best things to do for my recovery. And even till this day, for my clients, detoxing or getting off the drugs is not enough, man. You got to feed your body right, and you got to move your body right, and obviously sleep right too, and connect with the right people. But interestingly, man, people detox and get off of drugs, and they think they won the battle. I'm like, nah, bro, that's only half the battle. Now you got to really nourish your body and move your body right, and get yourself revitalized. So yeah, intuitively, I just knew, and I think everyone here listening to this, they know how to eat clean. Right? I mean, especially people listening to your podcast. Like,
when they ask, they're like, you know what to do. Like, why are you asking? Like, don't you know what this is?
Because you're Dr. Brad Campbell. We want the reassurance from you.
Right.
But the people listening to this, like, they're pretty educated, man, and they know what to do. But knowing what to do and doing what you know is a very different story. And sometimes I feel like people need to get sick to get the motivation to want to do better. I think sickness is the greatest motivation to want to get healthy.
Yeah. So you were a pretty big tennis athlete though as a kid, right? Like growing up, high school, college. Weren't you did you make like states or tournaments like that?
Yeah, at my highest, I was ranked number 8 in the state of New Jersey, which isn't saying much considering the fact that the number 1 guy in the United States will get crushed by, the 100 guy in the world. So, tennis was tremendous in helping me recover from all this poisonous stuff that I was putting into my body. And I encourage all my clients, the 4 pillars of mental wellness, Brad, I'm telling you, greater than 50% of the people that come into my practice that see a psychiatrist will need a psychiatrist if they slept right, they ate right, they moved their body right, and connected with some really good people, the right people, I would say. So exercise is like a must, but it's weird, man. Maybe not your clients, but a lot of the people that come in for like mental health treatment, they just don't want to move their body. And I'm like, listen, man, I'm just keeping it real with you. Your mood is going to be inversely proportional to your body weight. You know, like you weigh, Mrs. Jones, 283 pounds, and I can't imagine you feeling good like this. They're like, no, it's not about that. I need to go up on my prestige. Sure, you can see the next guy, but that's not how I want to operate.
So you're saying lose as much weight as possible, start becoming anorexic, and then you'll feel super good because if you go down super, like, I feel like everyone on social media, they take it to the extremes. They're like, but he said if you go down in weight, you go up in mood. So I'm going to keep losing 5 pounds. So, you know, you're like, there's a set point.
But think about it. Chances are you don't gain like 295 pounds of weight from eating like grass-fed beef and like mangoes. You know,
right?
Chances are you're putting poison and processed foods into your body. So just, I know there are like people like the Carnivore MD and then hardcore vegans that are like super extreme.
Yeah.
I'm just like, look, man, just eat some real foods. Just keep it super clean. And I feel like you and I have that philosophy also. Like, let's just keep it simple. Like, let's not go too extreme on one end or the other.
Yeah. A lot of people are really overthinking it. You know, they're like trying to find the best diet and they're getting analysis by paralysis. They're waiting until they find the perfect diet with the person they trust, and maybe they do like a blood test or something. They're trying to like spend a bunch of money to try to figure out what to do, when I think if they intuitively did what you did and said like, I think fruits are like nature's healing medicine. They just clean out your body. They're nature's candy, as you said. Yeah. If people just intuitively listen to their own felt sense, I feel like they know at the end of the day what is good for them or not.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're doing really well. You're trying to empower people, and me too, to some extent. Like, look, become your number one doctor. That's like our thing. And it's not that difficult. You know, it's not that much of a rocket science. It's just like a very clean, honest approach to just take better care of yourself, man.
Yeah.
And then people that come to my practice will be like, whoa, holy cow, man, this guy told me to take better care of myself. I never really thought of it that way.
They have that epiphany?
Well, I'm simplifying it.
Yeah.
But if you really think about what I do for a living, I encourage people to take better care of themselves. And then once they do that for a few weeks and they notice they feel better, they're like, holy cow, this guy's a messiah. But if you really, and then my friends will make fun of me like, wait, you make a living based on telling people how to eat cleaner and
move their body
and stop putting the drugs into your body and
sleep more.
Yeah. Make better friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Simple. It doesn't have to be that difficult, right?
Right. I feel like the hardest one of those is probably either eating well or making better friends for people.
Yeah, especially mushrooms. I don't know about your patients, but my patients don't want to eat mushrooms. Something about fungus, they want nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and I think mushrooms are one of the 6 superfoods on the planet, but they just don't want to.
Don't you use them for they have some natural vitamin D, which you put in your Beyond Recovery vitamin D too. Yeah,
I have a mushroom D3K2 product. And I only added the mushroom in there because the D3 is derived from a fungus. And I was like, oh, let's add some more fungus in there. Let's add some mushroom in there, because people will stop smoking and they will stop heroin, but they will not eat mushroom.
They just don't want it.
They want nothing to do with that, man.
Weird aversion.
But again, I think your population, the people that support our account, listen to this podcast, they're a little bit more enlightened than the general population. And I'm sure plenty of people love mushrooms and mushroom soup and incorporate it into their diet regularly.
Do you have a favorite way you eat mushrooms?
Oh man, I can't believe you're asking me this question, man, but I love mushroom on my pizza. Oh, I know. People are like, all right.
It's like putting the antidote on your poison.
It just, look, if there's an opportunity to put mushroom anywhere, just do it. And pizza. So when I eat my pizza, I like to have my mushroom on there. Or on my, filet mignon.
Yeah.
So it's good on that.
That is good. Yeah, a little like butter fried filet or something like that. Butter sauté filet with some nice mushroom and onion sauce. Mm-hmm. Like blue cheese on top, but yeah, it'd be nice. What about the whole friend thing? Because I want to like just touch on those 4 points going to like the modern medicine. Because like moving your body, I think people know. I always tell people find something fun, like a fun way to move your body, like tennis, something enjoyable, because otherwise they're not going to want to keep doing it. Like if they hate going to the gym, they're not going to keep going. So I'm like, find something fun. It could be a dance class, or my sister does Zumba. She got that got her back into working out because she danced as a kid. So like find something you liked doing when you were young, like dancing or tennis or sports or ultimate frisbee, or if you liked running, biking, whatever it is. But the fun part helps a lot of people. Eating well, we've covered. It's actually surprisingly simple. Like eat real food that's not poisonous.
Yeah.
But the whole finding better friends, is there something you find with your patients and clients? Like, is there something where they struggle with getting new relationships or circles of friends that aren't as toxic?
Okay, so here's how I'll answer that. And this is how I advise my clients to think about relationships. In college, I took a course called social psychology. And one of the most important things I've learned in all of college was this one point that this college professor made. And he came out and he said, "What is the purpose of a relationship?" And everyone rose their hand, and someone was like, "To love, to enhance the life experience, to share joy together," whatever they were saying. And he goes, "Yeah, I guess." But what he said ended up shocking the shit of everyone in the auditorium. And he said, "A relationship at the end of the day is a business." And people are like, "What?" And the guy's looking over at his girlfriend, is like, "What, this is a business?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, absolutely, because it's an exchange of value. You don't hang out with people that you stand to gain something from, and the people that are in your circle, they only hang out with your ass because they stand to gain something from you. Even if it's laughter or fun or joy, or you do drugs together, like there's always something that you gain from someone that you hang out with. So if you're wondering, like, why is Jamie not calling me anymore? Like, you got to ask yourself, like, what does Jamie stand to gain from hanging out with your ass? And vice versa. So I ask my clients always to consider, like, hey, these people that you surround yourself with, like, what do you stand to gain from the relationship? Like, let's look at this very logistically. Do you gain joy, fun, love? Is there something, a net effect? And if you don't gain anything, but all you're doing is giving, then is it really worth the relationship? So I find out a lot of people hold on to these toxic ass relationships where people keep taking and draining, and like you're always picking up the phone because this Tiffany's having a crisis, so you're always there for her, but you're not really getting much back in return. And I'm really big on self-care. So you're not really caring for yourself if you're just giving your energy freely to all these people. You don't have the bandwidth for your loved ones when you just have these toxic people in your life. So I try to advise people to look at relationships that way. Is it a socially beneficial exchange for both parties? Yeah,
that's really wise. I think reminds me of the I think it's like JFK, who is like, ask not what you can do for your country, or what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. It's like the same thing. Like, you need to be thinking, like, if you're not enjoying your relationships, like, what are you giving and what are you benefiting? Some people are on the side of like being selfish, and they're just taking and taking and taking, and they're not really giving anything, and then the relationship blows up. The other side of the spectrum is the exact opposite, where you're just giving all the time, getting drained, and not getting anything back.
Yeah.
It's like, I used to have that thing of like, I would get bummed because I'm like, oh, I never really like reach out to people anymore. Like, I feel bad. A lot of people feel bad about not texting old friends, but they're also not texting you either. Like, it's like, if they text you, you'll probably text back and have a conversation. But if you start feeling bad that you're not reaching out to like your 50 old friends from childhood, you got to remember, like, they're also not reaching out to you.
Yeah.
And it is like a two-way street.
Yeah. And even for the people listening to this, I want you guys all to know that, like, Brad and Alec are the two guys that I consult with all the time, depending on the topic. If there's something that happened, I'm like, wait a second, Alec, what's going on here from your perspective? And Brad, what's going on here? So I'd love to get like medical insights from you guys. And then I talk it on my live, almost like it was my idea, whatever you guys.
Love it.
So just keep it real. And then, I don't know, Brad, I mean, maybe, like, I don't feel like, I'm wondering what I do for you, but I don't know, maybe I could be your psychiatric consultant if there's something new coming out and you want to pick my brain. Yeah. But I feel like it's somewhat beneficial on both ends.
Definitely help each other out. I mean, you helped me grow my account too. Like, you helped me get exposure. You helped show me the way of like the value of Instagram Live. You helped teach me leading by example too, like showing how to storytell really well is one of your biggest gifts.
Thanks,
in your
man.
lives too. Like you put on basically your own TV show by yourself on a weekly basis, and you have like the rundown on your story where you like put up like the bullet points of like what you're going to cover, and it's just like it's well planned, it's well outlined, it's well researched. You have different like cameras going with your backup phone and like things ready to go, and there's a lot more intention and care put into those things than most people just like popping alive and they're like, hey, here's my salad, and I just want to rant about this thing that happened in my day. Like you're actually doing it with a purpose to help people.
Yeah, thanks, man. That means a lot to me. Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I've lost a lot of friends during the past several years. I think a lot of people don't agree with my stance on basic science, which we all could find these days on what's really happening. But a lot of my friends didn't like my stance on things. So I lost a lot of friends, and me going on an Instagram Live, it allows me to have that connection with people. Like we all have that need to connect with other human beings. So although it's virtual, I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather have it in person, but.
Definitely. Yeah. And the people on your lives like really get to know you and bond with you too. But has it been weird for you, like becoming an influencer, having a large account on TikTok and Instagram? Like, was it strange? Because when you meet people who have been following you for a while, it's like they know everything about you and you don't really know a lot about them. Have you ever met those people? Has that ever been strange for you?
Those people are like all across the world. So like meaning there are a lot of people in Australia and Canada, and although I diss LA all the time, there are a lot of people in LA that like my stuff, or New York for that matter. But in Pennsylvania, dude, people hate my guts, man.
Really?
Yeah, man. I lost a lot of business during the pandemic because the doctors in my community, they don't refer clients to me anymore because they think I'm crazy about my stance on the vaccines. Oh, I could say it. The vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to get referrals all the time from the local pharmacists, the doctors in the area and everything. I don't get referrals anymore from them, but I get referrals from other clients that liked the work that I do, which is fine. But yeah, they still, you know, even when I see my family doctor now, and he is so desperate to give me a prostate exam.
He just really likes your prostate.
I'm like, bro, man, my PSA levels are just fine. He's like, yeah, but you never know. Like, I could stick my finger in your butts and we could find a mass there. And I'm like, bro, like we got spaceships going to the moon allegedly, and the best technology you have is to stick your finger up my butt. Like, you don't have any device that can see if there's something there? Like, no. So I've refused every prostate exam. He's fully convinced that I'm going to have something going on. But anyhow,
I just take an MRI or something.
Yeah, man, give me that at least. But this guy, my point being is he's my family doctor. We're friends, but he don't refer clients to me anymore. And he still asks me every single time, like, did you get the booster? I'm like, I didn't even get the original. And he's like, why not? And I'm like, did you read the research, the data, man? Have you seen the open VAERS? And he's like, oh, that's all garbage. Really? That's the government report. So
yeah.
So we just agree to disagree.
Yeah, it's tough when people like poo-poo injuries, because that's, I think, one of the ways that conventional medicine gets a bad name. And a lot of psychiatrists I've seen around here, like I've seen some really good ones and some bad ones. I want a brief story about that. So junior year in high school, I started having some issues in school. I was like getting a little lazy maybe, and wasn't going to school every day. It was kind of like...
Wait, tell me, you weren't going to school?
No. Which was weird because I'm hyper curious. Like the teachers always loved or hated me because I was the one asking a million questions.
Wait, time out. You not going to school was an option?
Yes. Well, I pretended to be sick.
Oh, okay.
Because I was like, I feel a little blue. I don't really feel it. Like, I don't know. I was like, sometimes I would have like a cough. My throat would hurt and be like, I never really complained. And so my mom's like, woo, something must be wrong. He's like not wanting to go to school. Like, okay, let's let him stay home. Yeah. And eventually my mom got sick of it. My grades started slumping. My mom thought I was being a rebellious teenager. And I just got kind of like, I'd be fine for a week. Then I'd be really tired and kind of down for a week. And I just didn't know what was going on, if it was like seasonal affective stuff or what was going on. So she took me to a psychiatrist and was like, I think my son needs to go on some psych meds. Like he needs some Ritalin.
Obviously.
He needs some antidepressants. Like we got to get him back to school, because he went from being like an A student to like he's getting a D. He's failing some of these like calc tests. And luckily the psychiatrist did what you do, which is not what they all do. And he took a long history, like listened to my story, got to know me. And he tested me for mono. And I had mono for 6 months and no one knew it.
Okay.
And so I was super fatigued. I was just a little run down. He's like, your kid just needs like to rest. Gave me some vitamin C, vitamin D. Just had me like eat a little bit cleaner because I was eating like junk at that point.
Yeah.
And I was better. So like to him, I probably owe a lot of my life, a lot of my mental health, because I could have gone on like a benzodiazepine. He could have put me on some Ritalin or something, which could have caused other issues. And so I'm super grateful to that psychiatrist. But I have many patients who see psychiatrists and they get bad results, or they get put on the 3 psych meds, or they just keep up in their levels and they don't ask like, well, are you exercising? Are you sleeping? And they can't tell you how many patients I have, high schoolers especially, where they're getting like 4 hours a night of sleep and they're getting put on a bunch of psych meds to compensate for that sleep deficiency. Yeah. But if they just turned their phones off and went to bed, they'd be so much better. They wouldn't need those meds to stay awake in class. And
you're right.
It's one of the issues I see in the medical field, especially the psychiatry field. I forgot how I segued into that.
But there's a huge shortage right now on Adderall. I don't know if you know.
Yes.
And there's a way, my take on it is, okay, so if you read the articles, they'll say this is because there's more awareness on ADHD now. And this is great that more people are getting treated with this life-saving medication. And I'm saying baloney on that, man. I think what's happening is social media and the phone, it's just getting more and more addicting. And bro, we got these like, professional neural marketers, these people with like PhDs from like Harvard, these tech dudes from MIT, getting paid hundreds, if not millions of dollars to figure out ways to make everything more addicting. They get paid to get people's eyes glued onto the screen. And when you have more addicting content, bro, like think about like even our social media account. Back in the day, you might be able to post like, hey, mangoes are really good for you. Yep. And people will give you 1,000 likes on that. You do that now, no one's watching that. You got to make your video like really spicy and do all these little sound effects or whatever and make it like 15 seconds, a lesson in 15 seconds or less. So when you see that kind of content, and not only that, but like fun, dumb contents, like a lot of these TikTok things that are like my kids are watching now too. The real world gets very boring when you take your screen off, face off the screen, and then you're looking around. It's just not nearly as stimulating. You got to also consider the fact that like in the schools too, the teachers are competing against YouTube. Dude, like I'm watching some of these YouTube videos on like immunology, and like I finally get it now with the visuals, because the professors in medical school did such a lousy job in explaining like how like, your immune cells work, that when you see it on a YouTube video and they explain everything in like 10 minutes, it's like, wow, I just learned more in that 10 minutes than I did like all of immunology in medical school. Like this makes sense to me. So I don't blame people for dipping out in classrooms or in reality when the screen is so much more addicting. So that's why everyone thinks that they have ADHD, but it's not. It just, technology is just like, it is kind of messing things up for people's attention to real life stuff.
Yeah. So how do you recommend people try to limit some of their screen time? Because I think it is shortening our attention span. It is causing a lot of problems. As much tool and benefit as it can be used for. Like it could be used for good, but it also oftentimes isn't. But how do you advise your patients on that?
Yeah, I advise my patients on this, and I'll share this with you, but I'm probably successful about 10% of the time in getting people to actually follow through on this. But I want to give you a quick story. This kid in my practice, he's only like 15 years old or so, and we determined that he has like some serious behavioral issues. So I said, hey, what's your screen time like on your phone? He goes, oh, I don't really stare at my phone much. Oh, well, do you play video games? I do. How many hours a day do you play video games? He said about 2 hours, right? The father opened up his phone and did the actual thing. The kid was on the video games for about like, on average, about like 15 hours. And granted, he's not playing the video games for 15 hours, but he does have it on like throughout the day and stuff. But I would say it's more like 7 hours a day. So he comes home, he's just playing video games all day with his friends. The days of like riding bicycles and, engaging in some sort of like fitness or like real-time activities with friends, like that's not happening anymore. These kids, they are neighbors. They live right next to each other and they're playing video games from each other's homes. Mm-hmm. So these kind of things happen all the time. And I advise my clients and their parents, like, look, there's tremendous evidence that supports that the greater the screen time, the more issues you're going to have with depression, anxiety, attention issues, energy, fatigue issues, and so on. Having established that, you look at the parents' screen time, they're like 10 hours, man. So when the parents are all addicted to their phones too, it's very hard to get them to like enforce certain things on their kids too. And not only that, but like the diet thing is a great example. Like if I'm trying to encourage the kids to eat less processed foods and more real foods, and the parents are all overweight too, it's really hard to get that going, man. They're not going to change their way of life. And now also the other big thing is like with inflation, they're all complaining that they can't afford to eat the organic, healthy foods, and it's easier for them to buy the cheap processed stuff. So, yeah, I think all of that stuff is having a detrimental effect on people's mental health and their attention span too.
Yeah. So I think the kids learn by example, especially when they're really little. So if parents are on their phone the whole time, that's what they learn is normal or healthy, or like that's your role model is your parents, right?
Yeah.
So if they're not eating well, if they're on their screen all the time, your kids are going to start picking up those same habits.
Yeah. But having said that, the thing that has been like, if I'm successful 10% of the time trying to influence someone, I try to get them involved in the sports. So for all the parents watching this, man, like the best thing that you could do for your kid is get them involved in some sort of team sports. And in that way, like they have something else that's stimulating and fun to do. Because if you just tell them to not stare at their phone, hey, like Johnny, we got to limit your screen time to 3 hours or less a day. Then what are they going to do? Like you got to replace that one addiction with something else that's stimulating and fun. So I think sports is like arguably sports are like some sort of like if they could learn a new musical instrument. I don't know if people want to learn a new language, but like I think sports is like very realistic to do. Something that's going to get their body moving and stimulate their mind and connecting with other people too.
So do you think because of the phone with the attention span decreasing because of TikTok and Snapchat and all these reels and shorts, do you think that's impacting kids' ability to focus in school?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
How come?
Microsoft actually did the study about the human attention span, and I forget what year this was published, but in the recent past, they determined that the average human attention span is less than 8 seconds before they think about something else, and that's worse than a goldfish. So, yeah, man, it's pretty bad. And it's no secret. This guy, Dr. Jonathan Haidt, I think that's how we pronounce his name, Haidt. He was the guy on Social Dilemma on Netflix. He's a social psychologist in New York. And I tried to get an interview with this guy, but he's like, sorry, man, but I'm writing a book on how social media is turning the world into hell. And so that's his new book coming out. But he's like the front runner in this. And he's the guy that's been talking about how Facebook was created in 2006. The iPhone was created in 2007. And 2010, that's when more than half of Americans had social media on their, smart device. And since then, from 2010 to 2020, if you look at the middle school girls' like suicide rates, it jumped about 100%. And it's like the whole thing with the FOMO and comparing yourself to other people and the bullying, like girls and guys both bully, but guys bully by like punching and kicking and that kind of stuff. Women bully or girls bully by like destroying each other's reputation. So social media has definitely had a tremendous impact on mental health, but attention span, absolutely. Because you notice also that, YouTube is doing the shorts. Facebook is doing their Facebook reels too. TikTok, Instagram, like the stuff that are getting the attention are the shorter and shorter and shorter videos. You're one of the few people that I respect so much. Like you make videos that are 6 minutes long.
Yeah. They're oftentimes like 10. And I know most people aren't probably going to make it to the end, but I do it anyways because I think it's healthy for people to watch a longer video.
Right.
Even the podcast. That's actually why I'm starting to double down on the podcast. Like we did a dozen as an experiment. And I'm like, you know what? This might not be like my personal favorite form of content to consume. Like I don't like podcasts because I actually want it fast. Like I'm in that short attention span. I'm like, just tell me what I need to know. I'm a boss. I'm busy. I'm running a couple businesses. So like I want to know action steps. Tell me what I need to know. Just give me an outline, like an Instagram post as short as possible, less than 30 seconds. And then like, I'll go implement it. I'm good. Yeah. But most people I realize need a little coaching. They need the philosophy. And it's more important for them to learn how to think than learn what to think.
Yeah.
Like it's like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. They need a holistic psychiatrist like you to listen to you for an hour or two, get into your brain of like, how do you think about these problems and why is that important? And I realize like most people, when they have a certain issue, they'll listen to a few hours, because they care about it so much. And I'd much rather help people who care enough to listen to a 2-hour-long podcast than help the people who only want to dive into a 15-second little video. Like I had a person message me and she's like, you know what? I can't afford the membership right now, but could you tell me, like, I can't breathe. I got nodules on my thyroid. I can barely breathe. I need to know what to do, and I can't afford the membership. I'm like, well, one, the membership's $100. Two, you can't breathe. Like, if you really can't breathe, you should probably go see a doctor. Yeah. That's going to cost you more than $100 anyways. Like, don't look for your answer on social media. Like, go to a practitioner. But I feel like people's priorities and sense of, like, triaging themselves is a little bass-backwards most of the time. And when people value it more, like I want to attract the people who are really valuing health, want to understand the philosophy and buy in more. And I think those are the people who are, they already know what you just talked about and they're here. They're already listening to, 40 minutes in and they're invested. And I think those are the people I'm trying to get to now, is not necessarily the people who want to tiptoe into it. That's what like the shorts are for. But I think people who are really wanting to learn holistic healthcare for better health for them and their kids. Yeah.
But don't you feel like, you create long form content and some of the shorts, Insta Reels also. Yeah. And you notice that the traction on the Insta Reels are exponentially higher than the long form ones. And a lot of people's minds are gravitating towards like that quick 15-second solution. And it's like that with psychiatry too. Like a lot of people don't want to do the work. They want that pill or even the supplement thing. I said like, I have a supplement line, but eat real foods first, take care of yourself first, supplements on top of all that stuff. But they just want that, like, what is the supplement that's going to help me with my anxiety? Like, why don't you try meditating and going for a run, man? Playing a sport, play some pickleball. It will be impossible for you to have anxiety after a game of pickleball. Impossible.
Yeah.
When you're having fun, you're laughing, you're sweating.
So you can't just throw supplements on a bad lifestyle. Like you can't polish a turd. You can't just like put a little rose pin on a turd and say like, this is a beautiful turd. Like you gotta get the whole person better.
Agreed.
Not just throw a little like one pill on them and say like, your problems are fixed. Like you were telling me the story yesterday when we were at dinner about how some of your colleagues in a group chat would say like, I put someone on this psych med, it's not working. What med should I give him next?
Yeah.
And you're like, is he sleeping? Like, tell me about this person. Like, why are you going to put him on another med? Like, what's going on? Like, you're asking the why question, which doesn't always get asked. You're just like, they're trying to figure out which med works the best with this other med for someone who's irritable. And you're like, well, is his wife cheating on him? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, give me a little bit more context, man. But this is how it works in Western medicine, man. This is what happens all the time, where one medication doesn't work. So then should we try Zyprexa or Risperdal now? Or maybe the new medication Safris or Rexulti? Well, what's going on with the person? So I think a lot of people go into medicine with the best of intentions, but I don't know, man. After you listen to psych patients complain about their lives, and yeah, we get paid to do that, but I think people like at some point they kind of get checked out, and that's why it's just a lot easier for them to just be like, okay, you're having agitation, let's put you on Abilify. Like, I don't think people come into medicine with that kind of intention to hurt people and just do a shitty, lousy ass job like that. But, at some point people just get burnt out and then they just start prescribing meds. It's just an easier way to do that. And that's why I only see 6 patients a day, try to limit that. And I work 3 days a week because I never want to get to that point where I'm just like trying to shut someone up and just saying, all right, take this, go to sleep.
How'd you transition to that? Did you go from an insurance to a cash-based model, or like how did you decide to take longer with your patients?
Yeah, it never was a part of the insurance system. So if, not to get too technical into this, but like we do bill out of network. So if someone has an insurance plan that does pay for doctors that are not in network, we do some of that. But yeah, man, when I first started working, I was working at this hospital, and I won't call out this hospital because I'm not interested in getting a lawsuit from these guys, but they paid me well to start off. And coming fresh out of residency, you're in all this medical school debt, making a couple $100,000 is like, great. So I would go in and I would be responsible for about 16 patients a day, right? And there was another doctor working on the same unit as me. I would go in at 9 o'clock, ready to see my 16 patients in the psych hospital. This guy was leaving. He would see 16 patients in an hour. And then he would say that he's going to his outpatient practice. And then he said he's seeing like, I forget how many, like, it was like, I think he was seeing like 80 patients in his outpatient right afterwards. And I looked at him like, how's that even possible? And he's like, well, you just do a quick med check, and, if they're depressed, then you raise their Lexapro, or maybe you try something else. Like, this guy is a criminal drug dealer. And this is the kind of people that makes people like me look bad in the field of psychiatry, because this is like the prototypical pill pusher. And then he was asking me to work for him. I said, no, man. So I want to be very anti that kind of way of practicing. Like, dude, I could be a dick. Trust me, man. I could be a dick. My wife says that to me all the time. But, there's certain lines that I won't cross, man. When it comes to another human being's life and you're prescribing a medication, you're a freaking doctor. Forget the Hippocratic Oath, man. But just as a human being, spirit to spirit, you shouldn't do that to people. Just like recklessly, just like give them a chemical and just raise it or lower it depending on how they feel. So this guy's doing like 2-minute med checks, man.
That's nuts.
2-minute med checks. And that's like kind of criminal behavior. But there are psychiatrists like that, and I was so turned off by that I decided to go the opposite way. And, I'm not making nearly as much as that dude, but I feel better about myself at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Did your parents have a background in some like traditional medicine roots that were more natural minded too?
No, man, not at all. In fact,
like standard American.
My mother passed from diabetes in 2019, right before all this nonsense started happening, and she died from diabetes. And, the last few years of her existence wasn't a pleasant one. My mother and I were super tight all our life. And in the last few years, man, she would listen to her Western medical doctor who said, hey, as long as your blood sugar is under a certain amount, it's okay, just to keep taking your medications. But then she would still be eating donuts and all this garbage. And I'm trying to explain to her, like, look, man, you don't have to take these medications if you ate a diabetic diet, and there are ways where, diabetes is curable if you eat a certain way. It could be managed through your diet. She wouldn't listen to that, and she listened to her Western medical doctor. We butted heads a lot. And so it's interesting how she has a son who's a doctor, but she wouldn't listen to her son, but listen to someone else who was clearly wrong in the approach. Just as long as your blood sugar's fine, you can do whatever you want and take these medications. So, yeah, man, my parents are really into the health thing. My bro, if you look at my brother and me, I'm 47, he's 52. He looks like he's 70, man. And it's very different. Like, he is into the big pharma stuff. He eats a certain way. I eat lots of like fruits and like real foods and limit processed. So it's just different how we age too over the years. Yeah. But yeah, my family's not into the health and wellness thing.
And from like getting to know you too, like you eat well, but you're not like a health freak. You're not like a Rodney Lavoie or someone where you're like, all I'm going to eat is like perfect, clean, organic GMO. Like you're going to add a little bit of the cream in this. You're going to add a little bit of maple syrup on your bacon this morning, but you're going to have the real eggs, the real fruit, the real produce. Like you're like, I feel like you're like a 90-10 guy.
And I even drank a cup of coffee with caffeine in there today.
You did some drugs this morning to feel good and like wake yourself up.
And you didn't give me too much shit for that too.
No, I wish I could have caffeine, but I usually get like 2 up and 2 down. But if I could just like have a cup of coffee, be good. I'd probably have one a couple times a week.
Yeah, I got you. It's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
I'm a little jealous of your coffee. Someday I'll get there. I'll be strong as Joe to be able to handle some caffeine. So what do I want to cover next? I think it would be good to get into how you treat patients. Like, what are your favorite treatment options? Like, besides the lifestyle factors, when people do need medication or substances or experiences or therapies, what are your favorite go-to things you've been using or exploring these days?
Sure. Oh, is that the question?
Yeah, that's the question. Like, do you have any favorite go-to therapies these days that you're investigating or trying with some of your patients you found to be helpful?
Depends on what they're struggling with. So sometimes, well, let me ask you this. Have you ever been like really depressed before?
Not really. I kind of wish I had been, but I'm like, no, I'm a pretty happy dude. Like I rebound fast. Sometimes with rebounds, like I'll rebound a relation with a rebound. I've stopped doing that, but I used to do that a little bit. Guilty.
Yeah,
as
you're
charged.
definitely an anomaly, man.
Yeah,
That's the thing. Like, you're usually pretty happy. I know you've been through some shit in your life, but you seem to like carry yourself well, and I guess your parents raised you well. I don't know.
Yeah, good parents. I think they're like stuff the feelings or move through it or whatever. I think we were still given space to feel it and like heal it and move through it, but somehow I have some kind of like bullshit detector that keeps me from getting in too much trouble. And I don't get too down on life. I think I just have too much gratitude to be alive.
Gotcha. All right, then how about anxiety? Have you ever had a really bad panic attack?
Literally never. Never had a bad. Sorry, John.
So people can't relate to you on this.
No, I attract anxiety people like moth to a flame. I joke about that. I used to like when I was dating people. I don't know if just everybody has anxiety, but I always attract these anxious girls. It's like the classic marriage stereotype of like anxious, uptight girl with like really calm, chill boyfriend or husband. That's like my dynamic. I'm always like the calm, chill one who's not super anxious.
Yeah.
But I've never had a panic attack. The closest I've gotten, I think, was like I had 20 espressos in a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
And that was probably the closest I got.
Okay, so the most common mental health condition, I don't like to use the word disorder in America, is anxiety conditions. And it's estimated that like 1 out of every 5 people have some sort of an anxiety condition, like a panic disorder or OCD or generalized anxiety and so on, PTSD. And one of the things that I always advise my clients, and everyone listen to this, one of the best advisements I could give you guys is to stop saying my anxiety or my depression. People will say like, oh man, my anxiety's through the roof. Like my depression like limited me to do X, Y, and Z today. My laziness, like, no. Because you of course know that when you say my anything, you're programming your brain to like reinforce that behavior or that thought process. So a lot of times when people say like my anxiety, you say that, you're never going to be able to do public speaking because you're fully convinced now. And especially if you say it with conviction, like my anxiety, then like you really believe that. And anything in the realm of like I can do something positive and like go on that stage, that goes down the trash bin in your mental space. So the better thing to say is my experience with anxiety, because everyone has experience with anxiety. They have that experience with depression or like that experience with anger. And that way you separate yourself from that condition. And I find that to be a much more empowering way of dealing with that than to constantly say like, hi, my name is John and I'm an addict.
Right.
I'm an alcoholic. And then it's like, do you really want to constantly reinforce that? So once the first thing that I advise my clients to do is to separate yourself from the condition. Say my experience with bipolar, my experience with OCD, so on. So that's one of the first things I do. As far as like if we need to go a medication route, and believe it or not, there are people who work out, they sleep right, they do eat right, and they have like a good support network, and they still have like really bad depression. And when I do offer a medication, here are some of the medications that I am in favor of. And there are people listening to this who might vehemently disoppose, my stance on this. But as far as an SSRI, Prozac is a very clean. Okay, so all chemicals, if you take too much, you could die on it. Okay,
Right, like water.
So, right.
Terrible analogy. Don't drink 5 gallons of water.
Right. But prescription medications ultimately are chemicals. You take too many chemicals, it could kill you. But having said that, because people are going to be like, no, Prozac, it contains this ingredient. I get you, man. But as far as the SSRIs, like compared to all the new ones, Prozac is very cheap. It's very effective. It's like relatively long acting. It's relatively easy to come off of. And a simple way to kind of like boost up your serotonin levels artificially, because it slows down the breakdown of serotonin. So it keeps it hanging in your synaptic area a little bit longer. I usually like to stay away from things like Zoloft, Paxil, or Effexor, because these kind of do the same thing as Prozac, but they are very, very, very difficult to come off of. Prozac is one of the easier ones to get off of. In fact, when people are trapped on Zoloft and they want to come off of it because their life situation is better, they don't feel like they need to be on these meds anymore. When I try to taper them off the Zoloft and they struggle with it, I give them a little bit of Prozac. And then the Prozac helps deal with the Zoloft taper. And then I take them off the Prozac, which is a lot easier. So I do like this medication, Prozac. I also like this medication called Vibryd, Viibryd, because because Prozac is something that's like, if you're really depressed and you're like tired and you're in a hole and you just don't feel like doing shit, Prozac could give you a little pep in your step. Vibrate is better for anxiety. So they both kind of do the same thing. They slow down the breakdown of serotonin, but Vibrate's one of the ones that seem to have a pretty good effect on toning down anxiety symptoms. And then for that time period, if you need that pep in your step, or if you need a little bit of that alleviation of that anxiety, it helps a lot of people. And then once they kind of get back into their routines and start working out, start doing other things that are helping themselves out, then we wean them off. So I think medications, like if you had like cool doctors like Dr. Brad and maybe myself too, who like think about things and like utilize these meds as like tools for a certain time period, psychiatry could be an awesome field, but people don't think about it in this way. And it's like, okay, well, you got to be on this indefinitely. Like that's the thing that really bothers me about the way people practice. So that's for the main things like depression, anxiety. Those are the psych meds that are pretty popular. I'm not a big fan of medicating kids for ADHD, man. I know a lot of people are doing that, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're giving kids speed. You know, Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, Modafinil, like these are all stimulants, and they trigger the release of dopamine and norepinephrine. And I do believe that if you do that for too long, like it's putting pressure on the brain. You're putting pressure on the brain to squeeze out dopamine and norepinephrine, and sustained levels of that over an extended period of time. I've just seen the people's chi diminish. I don't have any proof on this, okay? So I might be talking smack, but just from my 17, 18 years of clinical observation, like, you know that some people have a certain glow, and some people, like, just the energy is just a little bit dimmer, right? That chi. I'm telling you, man, when people do speed over an extended period of time, I can't help but notice that their glow is dimmer than before they got on the meds. And maybe that is necessary for a certain time period, but I would say, like, afterwards, like, get off of that, man. You know, use it for the time period where you need it to get through school or whatever. But if you don't need it anymore, don't use it. And a lot of times, like, these kids are being forced to be in an academic environment where, again, they're competing against YouTube, bro. Do you see how interesting these videos are on YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
And then you got to, you know, listen to Mr. Trent talk about earth science and volcanic rocks for 2 hours. Like, that's not going to happen, you know? So then obviously the kid has to get medicated to sit through that bullshit. And then when they're sitting through that, you know, I guess they could pay attention better. But why try to force that fish to try to climb a tree when we could help it find its flow in the river? So that's the way I like to go about things. But a lot of parents, they don't seem to agree with that philosophy, and they just want Johnny to get through school and get good grades. So, you know, just to talk to parents about how we should allow the kid to maybe try a technical school, or maybe your daughter was meant to be a baker. You know, she loves to cook. Like, why can't we go in that direction? It's ludicrous to them. She has to go to college and pay $75,000 a year,
right,
for a Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah, I can't understand that. Like, 4 years of 75, you're paying $300,000 for a kid to go to school. That's a house. Like, you basically, and if you got multiple kids, so you got like 4 kids, you have to buy like 4 houses for your kids just to go to college. Like, there's no way. The pressure these parents are putting on themselves is crazy in my mind. But if they got the money, that's great. But I do think some parents I've seen whose kids do better on speed, they like being Speedy Gonzalez. They'll take the weekends off of the meds to try to give their kids' brains like a little bit of a break. Yeah. But does that help a little bit if they take like 2-3 days off every week where they're not on the ADD meds? Yeah.
So I would advise my clients, like, especially over the weekends, or if you don't, there's this girl right now who I'm seeing, she is on a very low dose of Ritalin, and she takes that to help her study because she really hates school. And it's one of those things where, like, she really wants to go to college, but she hates school. So anyhow, I worked it through with her parents and her. We agreed like 10 milligrams of Ritalin as needed for studying. Okay. So that's something that I agreed to, but also take the supplements, like the Beyond Recovery stuff that I make, to help enhance dopamine and norepinephrine production. And we could get into that later. But so she does like a holistic way of treatment, and she kicked ass last semester, and she got into a decent college, very expensive though. And now it's her senior year. She already got into college. The second semester, it doesn't really matter, the last semester of your senior year. So we took her off the Ritalin, and she's still getting like B's. She's not getting the straight A's like she used to, but it's fine. She doesn't really care too much. And so I'm pro like using things as needed. Although conventionally they don't recommend, like if you're on a stimulant medication, you need to take it every single day. I'm okay with using it as needed to help you focus a little bit better in areas that you're struggling with.
Makes sense. I know in Chinese medicine, when I went to acupuncture school, they talk about that too, how a lot of the ADHD meds, they drain the kidney qi over time. So I do see a lot of kidney adrenal fatigue and deficiencies after kids have been on it for years. Usually they're on it in high school, college for a decade or more, and then they start getting like severe burnout in their late 20s.
Yeah, and also like if you look at people who do a lot of cocaine, they like age faster. It's almost like it speeds up your metabolism, your aging. And I would say that when people are taking stimulants, it's almost like you're borrowing energy from the future. You're always like, you feel better now, but then the next day, if you don't take that drug, you feel like a crash. So it's like you borrow that energy from the future. So
that probably builds a dependency too, which creates the habit of wanting to go back to it over and over again.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any other favorite medications, ones that you think are used well?
My favorite medication of all time is something called clonidine, Clonidine, clonidine. And it's actually an alpha-2 agonist blood pressure medication. And it suppresses the release of norepinephrine. So norepinephrine is the chemical version of adrenaline. So when people are in that fight-flight mode, your adrenaline goes up, but also like your neurotransmitter norepinephrine goes up as well. So it kind of gives you a little bit of that like nervous alertness. So imagine if you had an exam and that exam is 2 weeks later, you're like, I'll get to it, whatever. But then 2 or 3 days before that exam, you start getting a little bit nervous. You get that like, okay, I got to study for this. So then when that happens, you get a little bit more nervous and more alert. That's norepinephrine. So the reason why I bring that up is this medication, clonidine, although it is FDA approved for like blood pressure issues, I give it out for people who have challenges with sleep and or anxiety, and for people withdrawn from opioids. It is great for calming the body during like an opioid withdrawal. So one of the safest drugs out there, and I prescribe that a lot, and it's not habit forming. I would prescribe that to my own kids if they needed it. In fact, my son, I prescribed it for him because there were times, like there was a period where he couldn't sleep because he had like a lot of anxiety and stuff. So I gave him like half of this pill for an adult dose and put him to sleep. Next morning he was able to go. So clonidine is something that like if you struggle with anxiety and or sleep, or if you have a loved one who has an opioid dependency and they struggle with that restless withdrawal, they can't sleep, they're restless all the time, clonidine is great for that. Unfortunately, there's no money in clonidine because it's a generic medication. So you will never see a commercial on getting people on clonidine as needed.
Got it. Do you think the commercials drive a lot of patients coming in asking for things? Like, does that actually work, the commercial model?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you remember like that whole commercial with Ambien, works like a dream. And there was this other sleeping medication called Lunesta. Yeah, so a lot of people would see commercials and then they would say, hey, can I get a try of this? I haven't seen, and then there was that Cymbalta commercial, like Cymbalta because depression hurts. And then their big marketing thing was not only does it help with depression, but also helps with like neuropathic pain. So the commercials, once you see it, it's very hard to unsee it. You never see a commercial on how good blueberries are for you. You only see big pharma commercials. So once you see it, once you recognize that, you can never unsee that. But there are a lot of big pharma commercials everywhere between the Super Bowls, basketball games, you name it. But there are a lot of medications, like the weight loss medication, Ozempic is a new weight loss medication. It was like a diabetes / weight loss medication. That's big. Everyone's trying to get on that. But I haven't seen too many recent psychiatric medication videos.
Yeah. Do you think it's wise to try Ozempic for weight loss?
One of my patients almost died on that, man. And
what?
I'm not trying to get sued by Ozempic, okay? But the way Ozempic works is it enhances insulin secretion from the pancreas, but also suppresses glycogen breakdown from the liver. So ultimately, the net is less blood sugar, But the chemical, the way it works, also suppresses appetite, makes you feel fuller faster. So one of my patients who I was trying to get her on a cleaner diet, she instead elected to get on Ozempic, like a lot of other people do. They want that quick fix. Mm-hmm. And she got hospitalized because she felt like it was like like some sort of like a food poisoning episode, and it got worse and worse and worse. She didn't know what it was. Then once they took her off the Ozempic, she got better and she was discharged. And then I said, hey, so then how about you start eating like more fruits and just like, chill out with the calories and all this processed foods. And she elected not to do that and then went on Ozempic again.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And then before she went to the hospital, she started getting really sick. She stopped it. But she said like she thought she was going to die at the hospital and they didn't know what it was. And then they're like, maybe we should just try stopping the Ozempic. That was the only thing that changed since you started getting sick. So I'm not saying everyone who gets on Ozempic will go to the hospital, but the psychology is very interesting, Brad, how people just want that quick fix pill all the time, man. They don't want to do the basic things to get themselves better.
Well, I guess that's why a lot of people can go in and have a 2-minute appointment with a psychiatrist. Just like, here I am, here's my vital signs, here's my blood pressure. I'm doing okay. I'm a little more depressed. Can you up my meds? Okay, see you later. Bye. Like, I've had an ENT doctor that did the same sort of thing where I had sinus polyps. He's like, we need to do surgery. I'm like, does diet play a role with sinus congestion? He's like, nope, not at all. Like, he said there was no correlation between food and allergies at all. And I was having like a quarter gallon of chocolate milk in the morning. Then I was going and playing saxophone for 12 hours a day. And I was just getting tons of like mucus and congestion. Once I stopped having dairy, it went away instantly. And all I did was a Google search. Like Dr. Google fixed me. I was literally just like, what foods create mucus? And the first thing was dairy. And I was like, this mother effer. Like he gave me 3 surgeries before I just Googled what makes mucus. And I had like sinus surgery twice and my tonsils out, all because I was just having tons of mucus from these terrible cow milk.
That doctor is probably boys with that president of the American Psychiatric Association, who doesn't believe that there's any correlation between food and mental health.
Right. It was pretty rough. So after that, I was like, okay, not every doctor knows everything. Like the specialists know their specialty, but that was my wake up to like most doctors don't really know a lot about nutrition.
But let me ask you this. That doctor that didn't know about the correlation with dairy and your mucus and so on, do you think he's a bad person or he just burnt out?
I think he was burnt out. Like he was divorced. He probably was struggling. He was, probably burnt out as a doctor from all the med school stuff. He was a pretty good surgeon. I'll give him that. Like he did the surgeries well. I recovered really fast. So I think he was like honed at his craft, but he didn't have the mental capacity or time or energy to study any of that stuff on his off hours.
Right. So then if we could take this a step further, why is he burnt out? Because he's working too much. Why is he working too much? Because he wants to make money. Why? Is it greed? Does he want more power? Does he want his yachts, a second beach home? Like, does he have to take care of his mistress? It just, money seems to be the core root of a lot of effed up things in this world, man.
It's true. And people are valuing wealth over health.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I choose to work 3 days a week, because once I come to the realization that, making money is a good thing, but after a certain amount, man, like, what am I trying to do? Like, I have a home, I have a family, like I could pay my bills and eat food and shit. It's like, so what more do I need now? Like, what am I working more for? To build up my bank account so that, inflation could keep taking money away from me. And then what? I die with money in the bank and then it goes to my kids. They should work, So I just came to this realization several years back, like, okay, this whole, getting rich and getting power and, making more money and 10x your income and your investment, all that, it's all a scam, man. Like, maybe it's all the psychedelic talking, but I don't want to be involved in that. Like, I'm happy with what I'm making. And at this point, like, I think if people are truly enlightened, it's more important to make an impact and create some change for the better, like what you're doing through your programs, than to keep like building your bank account. It's a scam. Like that, they program us to believe that that's the American dream. Like make money, buy the house, go on dream vacations and do this, that, and the other, buy this, buy the Lululemon gear, watch the US Open, do all this. And that's all cool to some extent, but ultimately, man, just being present with your loved ones and creating memories, That's what it's all about, man. That's the most
Yeah,
important
man.
thing.
Which is why I'm glad you're here. I mean, this is inspiring me while we're talking to keep doing more podcasts, because I think this long form content gives me more hope for humanity than the short term reels. Like, as much as the TikTok like memes are fun, like this makes me a little more hopeful. Like, wow, Dr. Joe Yee, he's making a good income, he's raising his kids, but like you're taking time to only work 3 days a week, so you can actually be more present doing other things in life.
Yeah.
Which is really inspiring. You know, you can be successful, you can make it, you can be an influencer, you can have your own supplement line. But what are you doing with the other time? Like, what do you choose to do on those other 4 days a week? Working out now?
Yeah, well, I work on my supplement line. I'm coming up with ideas for contents. I do go to gym, playing pickleball, and yeah, that usually consumes a lot of my time. And then I kind of plan about, like, I go on my Instagram lives, and when I go on my lives, I you know, for a few hours at least, I'm just thinking about, like, what am I going to be talking about today? So it all consumes time. But also, as any parent watching this or listening to this, you know that being a parent is a full-time job, man. You become a professional chauffeur to your kids' tennis, their soccer practice, and
yeah. Like, how much of your life is spent with your kids?
yeah, I would say probably about like 20% of my day is with the kids. It's not that much because I'm not like one of these parents that have to be like with my kids all the time.
You're not homeschooling.
No, not homeschooling, but like, you know, I drive my kids to sports, and you know, now that Sophia's 13, she kind of doesn't want to talk to me much. You know, she just wants to do with her friends, and Marty's like really into chess. So I think for the parents listening to this, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. So, you know, there are moments where I spend 4 hours with my kids staring at a screen on the phone or watching a movie together, and we don't connect. And then we could have 5 minutes together where we have a pillow fight, and that creates that memory. Like, that's forever lasting. That's the kind of stuff that they're going to remember with their dad. So for the people here who are struggling with time with their family, it's not about the quantity. Just try to laser focus in on creating that one important memory with your loved one per day. Like, if you focus on that, like, what could I do to crack them up or something that they'll remember, then that's exponentially more important than spending 8 hours staring at the screen together and doing nothing and not being present with one another.
Yeah. It reminds me of those videos of you with your kids where you're hitting a tennis ball off, like, from across the room to hit something off of their head. Like, how many outtakes were them getting like pegged?
Probably about 7 to 14, I would say. But they want to get paid, so yeah.
Oh, nice.
And it's a sponge tennis ball, so.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
Yeah, it's not.
That was like a real thing. There was one time in college we had a tennis class for, like, we had to take so many gym classes in college because it was a liberal arts school. And one of my friends dared me. They're like, I bet you can't hit your friend from, like, across 3 tennis courts. And I just, like, served up, went all the way across 3 tennis courts, hit her right in the side of the head. And she had a pretty decent, like, bruise and headache for a day after that.
With the real tennis ball.
But I'm glad it was a sponge ball. Like, you can learn behind the scenes. You're not, like, secretly pegging your kids with it. I thought it was like real tennis balls.
Yeah, it's a nice sponge ball.
Nice.
They get paid $5. Now with inflation, it's like
That's
10.
pretty good. Well, now Sophia can do it to you. That'll be the new reel.
Oh, that's a great idea.
She's good enough where she can do it back at you. But
yeah,
reminds me of, do you ever play in college? Like, you do these stupid things where you sit like 20 feet away from your friends and you have a ball and you throw it at your guy friend. You have to, like, hit each other in the junk.
No,
You're playing. That was
what kind of games you play, man?
I only played that like once, and I was out. Like, it's a popular game. You sit like 2 table widths apart from people, and you take a ball and you just like throw it at each other, and you can't move. You like sit there, and if it hits you in like wherever, you just have to let it hit you. And the first person to hit the other person's junk like gets the other person out, and then just like rotate people in.
No. But if I could be honest with you, man, I played some stupid, dangerous drug games, like incredibly dangerous. Like, me and this guy, we used to have like massive ego. Like, it's always like us competing against each other as far as like who's better and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And this guy challenged me to a cocaine contest. So basically, who could do more coke and, you know, withstand the other? And I actually took him up on that challenge. Like, I could have died, dude, from a heart attack or a stroke. And needless to say, he passed out before me. But yeah, I would never play that game again. But I've done some dumb ass things, and It's because it's like from some of the most dumbest, like most painful memories that I've had, that I'm able to become who I am, to advise people not to do certain things.
Right.
Don't like learn from my mistakes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Some of the groupthink can really get you in trouble. It's like one guy by himself, pretty good. 10 guys together, really dumb. Really dumb.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did some wild stuff back in the days. Sure.
So what are you moving into now? You mentioned briefly that psychedelics have sort of shifted your perspective on life and your relationships. You can venture into the topic of plant medicine, psychedelics. Are they drugs? Are they therapies? Is it a guided meditation with, extra support? Like it's a weird middle ground for people, I think, when they start getting into this world of like, what's microdosing? What are mushrooms? What are psychedelics? And as I think you're a good person to get a bigger picture perspective on this, because you abuse some of these things and then now have also learned how they have great therapeutic benefit as well. But what's your take on this whole new psychedelic plant medicine sphere?
Yeah, I was initially really against it. So ketamine
Really?
got approved, the nasal spray, ketamine, S-ketamine got approved for treatment-resistant depression by the FDA in 2019 or so. And ketamine has been around since the 70s for anesthetic purposes. And I've abused plenty of that, in my 20s with ecstasy or Molly's MDMA, and plenty of things as a club drug. And that's what it's known for. So when it got approved for depression, I was like, no way, man. Like, I was very against the idea. I have a friend in the West Coast who told me, like, I should try this and I should get trained in this and offer this to my patients. I said, hell no, I'm not doing that. Like, I already experienced ketamine before, and I just don't see how this is going to be helpful for mental health purposes. So I held off on it for a while. But just last year, at the end of last year of 2022, my friend convinced me. He's like, dude, you're messing out, man. This is like some revolutionary stuff. And he explained some of the sciences, which I'll get into. And so I said, all right, I'll come by and I'll train in it. Maybe it could help some people, because as of now, like 9 million Americans are medicated for depression. It's not to say like that's how many people who struggle with depression, but they are medicated, 9 million, and about a third of them are treatment resistant. And I know you have never been through a major depressive episode, but I have, and it sucks, man. And I said this all the time. Like, I'll take anxiety over depression any day. The worst panic attack versus the worst case of depression, like, dude, depression is like effed up. And maybe some people will disagree with me on that, but other people will resonate. And so I have a special place in my heart for people who really struggle with depression. So I said, all right, fine. Let me try it out and learn a little bit about this. And when I did try it out and he provided the training for me, I saw a lot of things about myself that I needed to work on. And it was a life-changing experience for me. Like, I benefited tremendously from that. And then now that I have gained from that and have the knowledge to help other people out with it, yeah, this is the path that I'm going into with the world of psychedelics. So ketamine is like my main thing. We could talk a little bit about DMT/ayahuasca, MDMA, and psilocybin. But to start off with ketamine, it's a really interesting drug, man, because it's probably the only thing that I've ever encountered in all of psychiatry that really has the potential to heal people. And that's very hard for me to say from a synthetic drug from Big Pharma, right?
Right.
Because you and I have a very similar stance on what happened over the past several years. But this is the case where I ask people, like, look, let's put certain other medical products aside, and this other medication that's been around, for several decades now, really has the potential to heal, promote healing at least.
How so?
In three different ways. So one is that by undergoing embarking on a psychedelic journey, it allows people an opportunity to see what's in their subconsciousness. So when someone's doing a ketamine treatment, they have the blindfold on and they get a ketamine injection or a drip. Sometimes they do the spray or the oral tablets, some liquid tablets, but I do the injections. And when you're in the blindfold and you listen to music, and the music is the primary driver of the kind of experience you're going to have, if you listen to Megadeth versus Enya or some sound healing music, you're going to have a different experience. So the music is very important, but when they're going on this psychedelic journey, whatever you're seeing is ultimately in your subconsciousness. And it is said that about 90 to 95% of your behavior is dictated by your subconsciousness. So if someone is living their daily life routine, they're living their life, and they're constantly finding the same kind of thought patterns, behavioral patterns, getting the same results, and they're stuck somewhere. And they're like, I don't know why I just can't get ahead. Well, maybe we might need to dig down inside. Maybe there's something that's there holding you back. And so for me, one of the things that I saw on my trip was, and I came out publicly about this earlier this year, but I had a major problem with the nicotine vape pen. So I was a longtime smoker. And as an addiction doctor, you're like, dude, you're an addiction. I know. I am very well aware that cigarettes are bad for you. So I turned over to the nicotine vape pen, thinking that that would be the better option, only to discover that is exponentially more addicting. So I was hooked on it really bad, Brad. And towards the end of last year, it was really, really bad. I was probably smoking like at least one of those vape pens a day. That's like probably like 2 packs of cigarettes a day in terms of nicotine content. It was bad, man. So when I did the ketamine treatment, like I've always known that was holding me back, but it was swept under my subconscious. Like, I'll deal with it later kind of thing. But on one of my ketamine trips, I found myself chained in a dungeon, like in the basement somewhere. And then I saw a demonic figure coming down and handing me the vape pen. And I bowed down and accepted that. And it was such a fucked up scene in my mind. And I had to see that because I came out of that trip saying, holy cow, like evil has evolved, man. It's not some red dude with horns and a pointy tail and a black trench coat. Like evil has evolved in the form of like pornography, fentanyl epidemic, these vape pens that are like, flavorful, like fruity vape pens for like these kids. Like there's so many ways, social media destroying like kids' self-esteems and, the girls' suicide rates, middle school kids' suicide rates up 100% over the past decade. Like there's a lot of ways that evil has evolved, and evil doesn't have to kill you if it could get you to kill yourself. And the vape pen was a clear way of getting myself to kill myself. And people like you, me, and the people watching or listening to this podcast, I consider us to be light workers. We're people with good intentions, good hearts, want to do better for the world. Evil don't like people like us. They want to take us out. And what better way to kill us than to get us to kill ourselves? So when I saw that and recognized that, I said, I'm never bound down to this again. And as much as I tried to stop smoking, this was the only thing that worked. Like I needed to see that horrific image. So that's what I'm saying. Like psychedelic journeys can be a beautiful thing, but also it allows you an opportunity to do some shadow work, like seeing the things that you've suppressed in your subconsciousness, facing it and dealing with it. And that's what I did. Not everyone wants to deal with it, but I did. So that's one of the ways that it could help, by helping you undergo that psychedelic experience, seeing certain things that you may or may not be ready to see. The other way it helps out is, you've heard of the dopamine reward center. And there's also the dopamine reward center's evil twin, which is called the habenula center. And this part of the brain is responsible for holding on to a lot of dark, disappointing memories, unexpected, disappointing memories. And it holds people back. And there are people who are really struggling to let go of their past because of the center is so overactive. And when this center is overactive, it has a hold on the dopamine reward center. So people get very anhedonic. They don't have pleasure in the things that they used to enjoy doing anymore. So one of the things that ketamine does is it chills out this habenula center, which allows the dopamine reward center to just breathe again. So then people start experiencing pleasure, enjoying the things that they used to enjoy back in the day. So that's another way. But the most important way that ketamine helps out people is that, not to get too sciencey, but instead of working on the serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, neurotransmitter systems like some of these other antidepressants do, ketamine acts on the glutamate receptor system. And not to get too biochemically, but by working on the glutamate NMDA AMPA receptor system, there's a downstream cellular effect that happens, which activates a certain region of your genes called the mTOR region. And when that gene gets activated, a switch goes on, and then it almost becomes like a steroid for your neurons, meaning like your neurons become super fertilized now. And for the next 3 days, your neurons are like wanting to grow in a new direction. So if you are someone who wakes up with a very negative attitude, and people are like, hey, you should practice your normal gratitude exercises every morning and be grateful for whatever, X, Y, and Z, 1, 2, 3. And it's really hard for you to get into that state of namaste gratitude because you're always thinking negative. Well, what if we could reset your nervous system so that we could give you an opportunity for your neurons to develop new neuroplastic connections to think more positive? So that's what ketamine does. It offers people an opportunity to develop new thought patterns to feel different, to think different, behave different, and get different results in life. And I could attest myself, like I've been able to train myself to have a nauseous like neuroassociation with the vape pen. So haven't touched it since. Over 100 days clean from that. I used to hate reading books after medical school. I wanted nothing to do with reading books. I know it sounds so stupid to say, man, but that's just the truth. Like I had such a negative neuroassociation with books. Now I love reading books. And weight training wise, I enjoy playing sports, but I was never really a weight training kind of guy. Now I've got myself to associate pleasure to going to the gym. So all ways to kind of like biohack the nervous system and influence the nerves into a different neuroplastic direction. So yeah, I see a lot of promise for ketamine, and I went on a little rant there, but any questions you have based on that?
No, I mean, that's really good. I guess I see it being either like any drug, it's like, how are you using it? I see some clinics right now where they don't really spend a lot of time with people, and they probably put them on like too high of a dose. And they sort of like they do a ketamine injection or an IV drip. They put them in like a blindfold and they just let them go. And some of my patients have like bad trips, or they have bad experiences with it, and no one's there to guide them. They're like pushing the call button, no one's coming. They're like, oh no. And they have like 10 people in a room, and you don't know that person from John or whoever. And so like those are probably the sketchy places where it's really cheap. Then I see other places where you have someone who really cares about you, who's like there sitting with you, listening to you, taking notes for you, helping you if you have any questions, like easing your mind. Like that's the way to do it. And like anything, I think the intention and the purpose and how you do it matters just as much as the substance.
Yeah.
So I do think there is a lot of potential. And do you think I guess the main question I have is like two things. We can do one at a time. It's like safety. And do you think it's, what role do you see that replacing in modern psychiatry, like in conventional psychiatry?
Yeah. So as far as safety profile, the major side effects are like nausea, the dissociative psychedelic effects, and it may raise your heart rate or your blood pressure a little bit. So before we start, we got to make sure their blood pressure is like under 130 over 85, which most people should be able to do that. But again, it's been around since the 70s. It's super safe drug, man. I know it's weird to say that about a big pharma medication, but super safe. They give ketamine to little children in the ER all the time, like because it's one of the anesthetics that doesn't suppress your heart rate or your respiratory rate. So opioids, if you take too much, you stop breathing, you turn blue, and you die. So ketamine doesn't do that. So if they need to intubate a kid and the kid's freaking out, they give them ketamine, knock them out, and then give them the intubation without suppressing their respiratory rate. So it's cool in that way. But
you've told me too, you're also using like 1/10 or 1/50 of the dose of what you'd use to knock someone out.
Yeah. So they usually give kids around 500 milligrams of ketamine. And for a normal size adult, their first dose may be anywhere from like 30 to 60 milligrams starting off. Now, you mentioned something about other clinics or other places kind of doing whatever without really like holding space for these people. I've seen a couple lectures where these doctors will come out and say, to get the psychedelic experience, you need to be on at least 100 milligrams of ketamine to get the psychedelic experience. And that's a crock of horseshit, because I've had people on as low as like 20 milligrams that had an amazing psychedelic journey, and they learned a lot from it. So no, that's the issue with doctors and big pharma medications. Like everyone needs to be on 100 milligrams of Zoloft. That's not true. Someone could be on 25 and and that's all they need to get that anxiety under control so that they could continue and flourish in life. So one size, one dose, like that's how they get trained by these big pharma reps. Like you got to get them at the therapeutic dose of 100, 200 milligrams a day. And that's bullshit. That's not how it works. So, forget those guys. But yeah, like I have a formula that I use based on the person's body weights. And even with that, I like to go a little bit more conservative in the beginning, because someone could be hypersensitive to ketamine. So it's best to just kind of like take it slow and, go low and take it slow.
Got it. What position, where do you find it being the most helpful? Is it anxiety? Is it depression, trauma?
Yeah.
Like you said, I think before, like treatment-resistant depression is a big problem.
Treatment-resistant depression is a big problem, and amongst the people who have failed on multiple psych meds, there are studies that show that 50 to 80% of the people who do ketamine treatment would respond favorably and positively. So good for them. But I don't believe that you have to be very mentally ill or challenged or sick to experience ketamine. I think this is awesome to help people gain a different perspective on life. So try to think about it this way too. Like if you see the world through the lens of CNN and everything that you're interpreting about the world situation is through the lens of CNN, it could be a pretty depressing place. But then if you do ketamine and you're like, okay, CNN's still there, but I'm also seeing it from the lens of Fox News. Okay, there's a different perspective on life. Oh, and then there's ESPN also, interestingly. There's sports in this world. Oh, and then there's Netflix and all these other cool, fun shows. Like Kevin Hart, I could watch his, or Chris Rock. And then there's, the Weather Channel, the Cooking Channel, whatever. So ketamine allows you to have a broader perspective on life and helps you kind of realize that the thing that you were focusing on too much wasn't that important from the get-go, and maybe this is more important for me to move towards in my life. So that's a very generalized way of trying to give you a visual on how ketamine opens up your perspective on life. And I think everyone can use an alternate state of consciousness where they see certain things, and the thing that's been holding them back, maybe that doesn't need to hold you back anymore because there's something else that you can move towards that you love more. So a very general way of explaining that. But I think it could help in that way, gain a deeper perspective and understanding of life. But mainly, I think for hardcore depression, hardcore anxiety, trauma, and addiction, I could see ketamine offering people an opportunity to heal themselves. Even traumatic memories, it brings back certain memories from my past. And I'm allowed to face it in a detached way. Where I could look at it objectively and say, oh, okay, my father did that to me because he was going through some shit. It wasn't because he was trying to be mean. I mean, he was under a lot of pressure with the finances and coming to this country at an early age, and he didn't know what to do, and he just didn't know how to do anything better. And that's how he handled the situation with me. So, okay, I forgive him. No big deal. And so that's what ketamine does.
That is a big deal. You're like, no big deal. But that's a big deal. Compassion, forgiveness. So many people have struggle with forgiveness and acceptance. If I had a forgiveness pill, I'd be giving it to everybody. But no one knows how to forgive anybody these days, seems like.
Yeah. Meaning okay, I'm not going to hold on to that anymore. I forgive you, Dad. No big deal. Let's just move on kind of thing. Yeah. So ketamine has allowed people to just see certain things that were very traumatic and see for what it is and have a better understanding about it and move on. I want to touch upon this one thing that I think is really important. And this is one of my big mistakes that I've made with ketamine therapy.
Yeah, keep going. Okay.
So 2 quick cases. One is a patient of mine who was in a messed up relationship, and it took her 10 years to get over this traumatic relationship. 10 years. And she was crying to me, complaining to me about how she wasted 10 years of her life. This other dude that I met, he's a college kid. He was dating some girl for about 5 years. The love of his life. She broke up with him for some other dude. Heartbroken before his finals. He collapsed on the floor and was crying, okay? I've never seen him cry before, but he was devastated. And he was like, I can't study for my finals. I'm done. And then I said, hey, how about we do a little ketamine treatment? Maybe you could gain some deep insights into this and we could help you move forward. He'd had one session, and in 2 days, he made peace with the situation and he moved on, right? And then he kicked ass on his finals, and now he's dating someone new and he's happy. I don't want to say I regret the experience, but that was a tremendous learning experience, because I do believe that if someone has something that moved him from his peace to that magnitude, there's a lot to be learned from that. And I felt like I cheated him the opportunity to learn from that breakup, because not to get into too many details about it, but he messed up. He did certain things that he shouldn't have and whatever. And I felt like he needed to sit with that for at least a month or two. And then I could have offered him some ketamine treatment, and then maybe we could have taken it a step further, so on. But I felt like I cheated him the opportunity to really face what he needs to learn from the universe. So in the future, I won't do that again. But that's what I'm saying. Ketamine is a major biohack, and I don't want to say a cheat, but a major shortcut into going from point A to point B. And so in that way, I think it could be a little dangerous, like just these people just going to these ketamine clinics and not like really learning from their life experiences, just feeling better and moving on. And I think that in long-term wise, that could be not so good for your mental wellness journey.
Yeah, definitely not so good. It's a good story though. Like sometimes we have to allow ourselves time and space to feel bad. Like that has a lot of merit and value in it too.
Although I'm learning that you never feel bad. You're always happy. You don't get depressed. You don't get anxious.
Well, I think it's because I give myself space to feel bad. Like I had a breakup and like I had life plans. I had a seminar, I think, like that happened. And, some really rough stuff happened. And I was going through not depression, but I was going through like a tough time. You like feel bad. You wake up, you think about it. Sometimes you don't think about it. Sometimes you do think about it. But I had resources to process some of that stuff. I was meditating or going for long walks, talked to family and friends about it multiple times. Was seeing a therapist like once or twice a month who talked about it a little bit. And I had some different outlets, but I think the biggest one was just, I kind of like cut some of my other don't need to happen things. Like I had this space where I could say like, oh, I'm going to cancel some podcasts this week. I'm going to cancel plans with friends, even though I might have helped me, but like I took some time just to like reflect and be sad. And that really helped. I think a lot of people do tend to run away from the pain.
Yeah, yeah. And if we could segue into the ayahuasca thing for a little bit, because the other thing too that I've embarked on recently was experiencing what it would be like to participate in an ayahuasca ceremony. And, they say like ayahuasca calls you. And I got to tell you, man, of all the things that I put into my body, I am fully in agreement that ayahuasca has a consciousness. It really does, man. And if people listen to this, I would say a certain percentage have experienced that and they know exactly what I'm talking about. Ayahuasca has a consciousness. And I dare not ever disrespect Mother Ayahuasca, but I was called to it. And I was called to experience it in the Dominican Republic in the mountains somewhere. And the shaman that did it for me, it was interesting because when we did the ayahuasca ceremony and there were people next to me like throwing up and they're pooping and they're bugging out on the ground, like almost like seizing. And I was like this, man. I was like, oh my God, this is so intense. And everyone will have a different experience on this. But for me, I was seeing certain things that were like pretty heavy downloads. And ayahuasca was like, yeah, that's right. You thought you were bad, Street MD? Take this shit. This is what you need to see. So I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. I just want to stop. And I'm just looking around and I'm seeing everyone like seizing and bugging out and stuff because they're on their own healing journey. And the shaman's just like, yeah. And he's just giving his lecture and he's just talking. And I just realized that his thing was, yeah, man, you deal with it. Deal with it. Whatever you're saying, whatever is fucked up that you're experiencing, the good or the bad, deal with it. Process that. And in America, I feel like we need to do a little bit more of that as parents or even as like the psychiatrist. Like if someone's having some anxiety, like we're so quick to like give them a medication and say, okay, let's numb that. No, deal with it. Let's talk about it. Let's process it and let's figure out a way to work through that. So I like to model my type of treatment after that shaman because I was like that to some extent. But that guy was like hardcore, like, no, man, I'm not going to interfere with you. Like, figure it out. So then at that point, like, I'm dealing with my thing. And he offered me another drink. And I was like, no, man. He's like, I highly recommend you do this. Like, hell no. I was like, because it was really, really intense for me. And there are other people who took a third and a fourth drink and so on. But I stopped at like number 2. Like, my brain couldn't handle that anymore. Having established that, there are other people that do ayahuasca ceremonies, and from the moment they drink it, they feel ultimate bliss and a connection with the God or a higher power. But that wasn't the experience for me. But after you go through the ayahuasca download, you come back to reality and you realize like, wow, like heaven has been in front of me my whole life, and I just haven't been able to recognize it. So that's in a nutshell of what happened to me doing that ayahuasca. But scientifically, the active ingredient in ayahuasca that gives us this experience is DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And, ayahuasca is the combination of 2 plants. It's like the vine of one and the leaves of another. And they have very funky names, hard for me to pronounce. But the leaves of this plant has the DMT, But DMT in your stomach gets broken down by the acid, and like it just doesn't really go anywhere. The vine has the molecule that blocks the stomach acid from breaking down the DMT, so allows the DMT to have a sustained release action. So how they figured out the two, the vine and the leaves, legend has it that the South Americans spoke to the plants, to the jungle, and the plants gave them this spiritual message. So that's how they came across this. But yeah, man, it is something that was like a life-changing experience for me, like at a much grander level than ketamine or MDMA, psilocybin, anything I've ever tried. Ayahuasca is the mother of psychedelics, man. It's like the grand head honcho.
Wow. Sounds pretty intense. And that's, not something you do in your clinic, I think, right? It's like you have to go out of the country for that.
Yeah, DMT is a Schedule 1 narcotic, meaning, according to the government, it's highly addictive, and there's absolutely zero medical benefit to it, which is a crock of horseshit, because THC is in Category 1 also, Schedule 1 narcotic, and there's tremendous medicinal benefits to it. Psilocybin is on that list too.
Right, and it's now legal in some states for medical use.
In Oregon, Oregon now, yeah.
I think Washington's upcoming, or maybe they just decriminalized it in Washington too. But I know it's definitely it's a burgeoning field. Like it's kind of slow going, I think, because people are a little scared because they've been made to believe these things are very scary.
Yeah.
But it sounds like in the right hands, they can have really good benefit. I've had some friends, have even like marijuana or psychedelics and have some bad trips though, where like they ended up, they had mental health issues with their family history. And so how did you know you were in that space where you were wanting to do it? You said it called to you?
Yeah, it called to me. You and I were talking about this earlier today, but something about 2023 was really effed up. Like just from the beginning of this year, like I felt like the global climate, like psychological energy climate was like really dampened, and things just were just more stressful and more depressing for whatever reason. And I also had a lot of things going on with my personal life, with my relationships, my businesses, my own health. There's just so many things happening at the same time. And I really felt like Mother Ayahuasca was like, okay, it's time for us to get to know each other and me to share with you what you need to see, kind of thing. The first time I did ayahuasca, the shaman told me not to drink water after 9 a.m. So I drank a lot of water and no food up until 9 a.m. And then I drank my first cup around like 3 p.m.
Cup of ayahuasca?
Yeah, of ayahuasca. And just the liquid from ayahuasca was like, I needed that little bit of water, because I don't know if you ever went on a water fast, but it's very difficult. So for 6 hours, I didn't drink anything. And then I drank the ayahuasca cup at 3 p.m. And then by 6 p.m., I was going crazy, man, because the ayahuasca was building up. And then for me, it was a very intense mental, physical, spiritual experience. It was like very intense. And then when you're dehydrated and you're thirsty, the intensity is even worse. So I felt like I was dying. And then the shaman saw that. I asked him, like, when can I drink some water? And then he just like, well, you could drink water if you want to. I'm like, yeah, but you told me not to drink water. And he's like, well, you could do whatever you want. And I'm like, yeah, but do you recommend I drink water or not? And he said, it's up to you. You have a choice to drink water if you choose to or not. And then so I felt like it was a test, and I was like, I just want to do what you're recommending. Like, I want to go through your protocol. And he said, you do what you want to do. You have the choice. So I said, okay, then I guess I'm not going to drink water, because I feel like you're testing me. And then after another hour of that, he saw that I was bugging out. So he bought me this tiny little cup of water. And he said, just sip on this. Just sip on this for now. And then when I sipped on that water, man, it was the greatest joy of my life. I wish I could tell you that having my baby daughter, my firstborn child, when I got married, when I got my MD, like whatever. No, man, that little bit of water was the most important thing ever. And, according to Maslow's hierarchy, we have our hierarchy of needs, and like food, water, shelter. Our health is like the most important thing, followed by like our relationships, our family, love, our goals, our purpose, and then like enlightenment. It keeps going up. So like if you're in the middle of the desert and you're dying of thirst and you see the love of your life versus a cup of water, you're going to choose the cup of water over sex. You know, so I needed that experience to appreciate the basic things in life, like water, access to clean water, access to good food, and just be grateful for being able to breathe right now. Because the stressors were coming from like, okay, certain things in my business aren't happening the way I wanted to. Things aren't working the way it is with my marriage, and certain people in my life I felt betrayed me and hurt my feelings, and I was, social media is going this way and that way, and I'm unhappy with the direction of Instagram or TikTok, whatever, and I'm worrying about all these things, and I'm like, dude, Mother Ayahuasca is basically saying, look, man, appreciate the basic, simple things in life. You have access to clean water, good food, oxygen. You're young and healthy. Be grateful for that. Priceless lesson, man. And people watching this could be like, oh, yeah, it's important. But when you go through that experience, you get that download, and now it's engraved into your nervous system. So yeah, every single time I drink water or eat food, like internally, I bless it. Just super grateful for it. And it gives you an opportunity to practice gratitude genuinely, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So things like that, Mother Ayahuasca, I have to be grateful for.
Yeah. You're like, I don't need to get married or have kids again. I got water. Good to go.
I dare you, dude. Go like 6 hours without drinking water and see what's really important to you.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure. That'll be interesting. Maybe on like a long flight. Probably the worst time to not drink water. But, wow. I mean, that's a profound experience. So would you do it again?
So the question you're asking me is, am I willing to experience death again? Because it is like a near-death experience where you're in this like alternate state of consciousness. And for me, it was very intense. Again, other people could experience bliss, but it was the most intense 7-8 hours of my life. And, you really feel like you're dying. And it's almost like if someone has like terminal cancer and they're in a tremendous amount of pain and they have like limited amount of time left, like they seem to like appreciate the little things more. And I felt like after I went through that ayahuasca experience, it was like I was dying and then I came back to life, and now I appreciate the little things hell of a lot more than I did before. So if you're asking, am I willing to die again to appreciate life? Yeah, I would, but probably in 2024, man, not this year.
So it probably isn't a addictive substance.
Hell no, man.
You're not gonna be doing that every day.
No way is it. No, it is definitely not addicting, man. That's why like the government has it ass backward with this like Schedule 1 narcotic with DMT. Like, come on, man. People aren't gonna be like abusing it. It's like it's a pretty intense experience.
Yeah.
But life
I've
changing.
heard that from most people who do psychedelics. You're like, you do it and you're like, I don't want to do that for a long time. Plus it takes a while for that to integrate into your system. Like you were telling me, ketamine, you get neuroplasticity for a few days, but like your brain is kind of like processing that intense experience for a while.
Yeah. There are people who've done like 200 ayahuasca ceremonies, and I don't know if you need that many, man.
That can't be that great for your brain. I don't know.
I think like the Winter and Summer Olympics, like every 2 years, you do an ayahuasca trip just to kind of reset, put things into perspective, keep your ego in check, Yeah,
like I wonder what their brains are like a little carnival inside. Just like, I don't know. Be interesting to see how the 200, like I'd love to do brain scans on people or like functional MRIs and see what SPECT scans look like.
How do you feel about me, you, Danny Parrott, Vincent, and 6'7" Podcast? We go do ayahuasca together as a group. I think I could feel really comfortable with you guys. Like if you guys are shitting and vomiting everywhere, bugging out, like I think I'd feel comfortable with you.
I would say I feel honored that you would feel comfortable watching us shit ourselves, but I'm not feeling called yet. Like problem is like I feel like my laugh's pretty good. Like maybe when I get to a lower low, I'd be like, all right, now I'm ready to like, shake things up a little bit. But I'm like, I'm scared. One of my mentors used to say like he doesn't meditate because he's like, my life's too good. I'm scared I'm gonna like want to work less, or I'm scared I'm gonna want to like shift something. He's like, I just want to keep it the same. I'm grateful where I'm at, kind of thing.
That's true. Like you got it pretty good right now. Like you live a very simple, humble life. You got a lot of good things coming your way, and why would you want to, try to rock the boat in any way?
Yeah, I'd be scared to like go to ayahuasca and then like I'm ditching my doctor job. I'm just gonna be a barista. I mean, like I like
that
my
could
job.
happen.
I like my job.
Yeah.
I was a barista in high school. It was actually great. Loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time. I've thought about doing that as like a retirement gig. Just go work like a couple hours a day, open up the coffee shop, give people their drugs. It could be like a non-holistic psychiatrist. Maybe I could give them some lion's mane or something in there, some L-theanine to balance out the caffeine.
Yeah.
Could be good.
Yeah. So after I came back from the ayahuasca trip, man, I didn't want to make content for a while because my mentality was like, okay, I could spend 4 hours making a post about why it's important to work out versus maybe I could just work out instead.
Yeah.
And spend that 4 hours like connecting with myself and my body. So then I kind of disappeared from social media for a bit. I haven't been doing as many lives, and I think a lot of people are like, dude, man, you shouldn't have done that ayahuasca. You changed, dude. But yeah, I guess I did. But I saw certain things, and I cannot unsee it. And ultimately, I do fully convinced that it was for the better that I saw these kind of things. And there are certain things that I was holding on to. Like another really important ayahuasca lesson was like, there's certain relationships from the past that I was holding on to that were very toxic, and I didn't even realize I was holding on to it.
Really?
But when I was on that trip, I saw it and I was like, holy shit, like this thing I'm holding on to, it's like really weighing me down. And so Mother Ayahuasca gave me this analogy, like, okay, some relationships in your life are like food. They give you nourishment and vitality and energy, and they help you grow for a certain time period. And then it transitions into shit. And when it does that, you're just holding on to waste. It's just weighing you down. Why wouldn't you want to shit it out? So I went to the bathroom. I took a massive poop, and it was symbolic. I let go of that thing that I was holding on to. And I was like, holy shit, like I just flushed that down the toilet. And now it's time for new relationships, new nourishment, new vitality. So yeah, like it just like, dude, this is like one of like 217 different downloads I got from ayahuasca. It was like going to school. And so that's why as much emotional, physical, and spiritual pain I was in during that whole psychedelic experience, like I got a lot of downloads, and it's like, okay, this is what I need to work on. This is what I need to move towards if I choose to. A lot of people choose to not do the work, but yeah, I'm tackling one thing at a time. And yeah, it's been very helpful overall.
Very nice. Is there any like words of wisdom you'd want to impart to people who are like, that sounds interesting. Maybe I want to try that.
I would say if you are being called to it, it might be good to, and I can't even give this as a legal advice, man, but in certain parts of America, like Oregon or Washington, it's legal, but you might want to try psilocybin first, legally, wink, wink, right, and not from your neighbor. And just make sure you know what that experience is like, or maybe even try a ketamine experience before going to ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is like the mother of the psychedelics.
Yeah, so. It's like you don't want to be like a NASCAR race driver before you learn how to drive a car.
Or like, or like ride a bicycle, like just,
ride a bike first before you drive a car. Like learn how to move a little bit faster before you go 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, but to be clear, I don't feel like everyone needs this stuff. Like, look at you, man. You don't need it. You're a pretty healthy, happy kind of dude, spiritually in tuned. But I will say for some people who are stuck in certain patterns, like if they want to, I don't know, try to get through a certain experience, they're stuck and they want to accelerate a certain process, it could help you get to point A to point B faster. So I'm sure I would have came to the realization that food and water is very, very, very important in my life, and I would have appreciated that, but maybe that would have happened 7 years later. But right now, I took it for granted, and I've always had access to clean water. My in-laws own 3 successful Japanese, Korean, Thai barbecue restaurants, so I have access to any food I want all the time. So I've always taken food and water for granted, and not anymore. And once I've appreciated the simpler things in life, all the things that I was bugging out about didn't really matter that much. And I felt like that's what Mother Aya wanted me to see. And for people who do an ayahuasca trip, like Mother Aya will allow you to see what you need to see. Everyone has their different personal experience with it.
It sounds like some of the things you knew cognitively before, but you've learned to feel it on a much deeper level too. Like,
absolutely.
You knew that fruit was good for you, but now your appreciation, your gratitude has skyrocketed upwards.
Yes. And also, think about it this way too. People are very selective about who they choose to have sex with, like
good.
Right. But because someone's body is coming into your body and so on and vice versa. But if you really think about it, food is a much more intimate relationship experience than sex, because not only is that food going into your body, but it becomes a part of you. Sex, you pull out and then that's that, okay? Assuming you're wearing a rubber.
Yeah.
But food, that becomes a part of who you are. That's much more intimate and sacred. So like, things like that I was able to see from the whole ayahuasca experience too. Like, holy cow, like I really have to be careful with what I choose to put into my body.
Yeah.
So, and then people are very careful with who they have sex with, but they put poison into their bodies all the time.
Right.
So perspective like that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
It does, not everyone feels willing or able to share that kind of stuff, but that's big. Can I add one story from when we had dinner last night too?
Absolutely.
Where you're saying you were talking about after that experience, you also came back and were able to shift some of your relationships, your personal relationships for a little bit, where you were thinking more about what you were giving to the other person.
Yeah.
And I think that's so crucial. Can you talk a little bit more about that realization?
Yeah. So one of the major issues that I had at the beginning of this year, like my wife and I, we were like on the brink of a divorce, and it was really bad. So then she said, look, before we go into that separation department, how about you go anywhere in the world, take a week off, I'll look after the kids, and you really think about that. Because we were just butting heads for way too long, and it just culminated into 2023. So I chose to go to Sedona, Arizona, and spend a week by myself, like climbing the mountains and talking to the trees and so on. And that was when I was like, okay, I think I need to do an ayahuasca retreat and so on. But to make a long story short, my issue was that I felt like certain people in my life weren't appreciating me and loved me the way I wanted to and helping me out the way I want to be helped and so on. So when I did go on to the ayahuasca retreat, Mother Ayahuasca was like, I hear you, but to love is to give. And so what exactly are you doing to give to your loved ones? And she kind of had a checkmate on me, because I was like, wait, I'm bitching and complaining about what my wife isn't doing for me, but what am I really doing for her? So when I came back, my psychology was, let me try to help you out. I know you're taking care of the kids. You're doing a lot to help me out, doing a lot of things that I don't want to do, like managing my finances and stuff. I get to work, do my social media thing, help out my patients, and she takes care of a lot of things. And so why don't I try to like appreciate that and like help her out with some basic ass things around the household and so on. So when I had that psychology and that mentality and that intent to help her out, it's amazing how the love comes back exponentially, 2-3 folds more. So that has helped us out significantly with our relationship in that way. So yeah, we're in a much better place than we were in January. It's not perfect, but the mentality of let me give, how could I serve you, has, the karma has come back in a very beautiful, positive way. So thank you, Mother Aya, for saving our marriage.
Yeah. I think that works in bed too. Like those Chinese fortune cookies, you're like, you will have great fortune if you just pay attention and give more than you receive. And then everyone always adds in bed to the fortune cookie. It's like, that was a good in bed. Like also, yeah, just giving love in any way. I think one of my favorite quotes was, the hole you receive through is the hole you give through. So like, if you give this much, you can receive this much love. If you're giving just a little bit of love, you're only going to receive a little bit of love. People are like, why are people not happy? It's like, because you're probably not happy. If you smile at other people, if you ask them how they're doing, they're going to do the same thing right back to you. I try to think about that in my daily interactions, because sometimes I go a little too introverted and I'm like, oh, the world's kind of lame. Everyone's sort of like shy. I'm like, wait, that's just me reflecting myself on the world, because I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah. And I love that with the whole you give is the whole you receive.
That's what she said.
And a lot of things, that we're talking about, yeah, people can listen to this and be like, yeah, no shit, I get it. But when you have this psychedelic experience, and I don't work for an ayahuasca company or anything, okay? But once you see it and you feel it and you experience that, it gets engraved into your central nervous system a lot more powerfully. And then that way you're more likely to act upon the lessons that you've learned.
Right. Totally. Well, I guess in closing here, is there anything that you're doing coming up? I know you got a big talk coming up. You're thinking about writing a book, like a handbook on some safe use and utilization of psychedelics and things like that. But any places people can find you or learn more or follow you?
Yeah. I feel like everyone who follows you follow my account too.
They pretty much do. We've been cross-pollinating for some time.
Yeah. So social media, my Instagram is YojiMD, YojiMD. If you haven't checked out beyondrecovery.com, that's my mental wellness supplement line. These are the kind of things that I give my patients all the time. A lot of times people have a hard time want to buy 8 to 10 different supplements to help optimize their serotonin, dopamine, endorphin levels. And these are the main neurotransmitters that like psychiatrists always seems to mess with these prescription chemicals. So I figured out an easier way for people to take all these supplements into a consolidated package. So the mental wellness supplement line is beyondrecovery.com. I have a promo code StreetMD that gives people 11% off on the things that they want to get there. So
that liquid magnesium is my favorite. Love the liquid magnesium.
Yeah, and it's really good for the kids too, because my kids hate swallowing those big ass tablets. And so it's easier. Like for my kids, I give them 2 teaspoons at bedtime, and that calms them, helps them go to sleep. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff out there. And I was thinking of writing a book, but more like an online guide as to how to think about psychiatric medications. Because, like, I don't know if you know about the Ashton Manual, but it's a guideline of how to taper off of benzos. If I could have a guideline of how to safely taper off of, SSRIs and SNRIs or mood stabilizers or benzos, and like my own take on like stimulant medication detox, it would be very empowering for patients to have that, because, it's very easy in medical school. Like they teach you how to add on other meds, but they never teach you how to come off these meds.
That's the problem, I think.
It's a big problem, man. And the big pharma drugs, they purposely, this is my very strong opinion on this, they purposely make the doses a certain way so that it's very hard for you to taper off these drugs. Like if you are on 100 milligrams of Zoloft, right? They have maybe Zoloft's not the best example, but let's just say something like Cymbalta. Cymbalta comes in 20, 30, and 60 milligrams. Okay, so then if you're on 60 milligrams, if you want to come down, I guess you could take a 20 and 30 milligrams. And then I guess from 50, then you could take 2 of the 20s. But then you get down to 30, 20, and then 20, what do? How do you come down from 20 milligrams to 0? It's too much of a jump. They should come out with the Cymbalta 5 milligram pill to help with that adjustment. They don't do that. So towards the end, it's really hard for people to come off that last little bit. So you got to get really creative and that's why like I'll substitute a Prozac and then get them off the Cymbalta and then taper them off the Prozac. So I figure like if I could make a book about how to be smart in tapering things off and then bring that information to your doctor, it could help a lot of people come off of psych meds that they don't need to be on anymore.
I will help GoFundMe you a security bodyguard at that time when that comes out, because there might be some people who are losing a lot of money when that book comes out, but you're going to be saving a lot of lives too.
That is true. I didn't think about that part, man.
Sometimes you help humanity too much, get in trouble.
Yeah.
We've learned that the last 2 years. Don't say it. Don't say the truth too fast, and don't help too many people, and don't take their money. And life's pretty good. But I appreciate what you're doing for humanity. You got a lion heart, and thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Hey, it was an honor to be here and finally hanging out with you again and get to spend some quality time with you and the good peoples here. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Dr. Yee. Dr. Yee, Joseph Yee, the one and only Street MD.